Good morning and welcome to the officials from the Ministry of Finance Investments Division, Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation, and the National Information and Communication Technology Company Limited, known as iGovTT. My name is Senator Wade Mark, Chairman of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. The Committee on Public Accounts Enterprises has a mandate to consider and report to the House on the following. 1. The audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of all enterprises that are owned or controlled by or on behalf of the state. 2. The Auditor General's report on any such accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements. And 3, whether policy is carried out efficiently, effectively, and economically, and whether expenditure conforms to the authority which governs it. The purpose of this examination is for the committee to examine the audited financial statements of the National Information and Communication Technology Company Limited, iGovTT, for the financial years 2015 to 2019, to ascertain whether expenditure conforms to the authority which governs it, to determine the challenges being faced and possible solutions to these challenges, and to ensure that the policy of the iGovTT is carried out efficiently, effectively, and economically. This virtual meeting is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11, on Radio 105.5 FM, and on the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Participants are advised that their microphones should remain muted until recognized by the chair. May I at this time invite my other colleagues on this committee and who are present to introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting. I am Laurel Lizama-Leasing, and I am a member of this committee.
Hi, good morning. Rashtan Pare, Vice Chairman of this committee.
Good morning, everyone. Amrita Devnarain, member.
Is there anyone else? I think so. The Honorable Fitzgerald Hines. Is he there? All right, well, may I take this opportunity to now invite the following representatives to introduce themselves. Ministry of Finance, to be followed by the Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation, and of course, the National Information and Communication Technology Company Limited, in that order.
Mr. Chairman, permit me, before that happens, to introduce myself. My mic was off. I am Fitzgerald Hines, committee member.
I was missing my friend, but I'm glad that you have been found. Let us proceed now to the other representatives from the Ministry of Finance Investments Division, Public Administration and Digital Transformation, and National Information and Communication Technology Company Limited in that order.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. I am Sharon Mohammed, Acting Director, Social and Economic Transformation with the Ministry of Finance Investment Division. In the room with me is Mr. Suresh Dan, Acting Senior Business Analyst, and Ms. Kimberly Pascal, Acting Business Analyst.
Thank you. Ministry of Public Administration.
Good morning, Chair and members. I am Claudel McKellar, Acting Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation. I have with me in this meeting today 3 other representatives of the ministry. I have my Deputy Permanent Secretary, my Manager Planning, Policy and Monitoring, and my Director ICT. Please allow me to let them introduce themselves in that order.
Thank you.
Good morning. I am Angela Lum Joseph, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation.
Good morning. I am Abigail Bino, Manager Policy, Strategy and Monitoring, Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation.
Good morning. Gary Turpin, ICT Director, Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation.
Thank you. And may I invite officials from the National Information and Communication Technology Company Limited.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Dr. Sean Rock, the Chairman of the National ICT Company Limited. In the room with me, I have Directors Jacqueline Morris, Howard Dotting, and Anthony Tigley, as well as members of the management, the CEO, Mr. Kirk Henry, Mr. Sherwin Ragunanan, the Acting Deputy CEO, Ms. Janet Peters, the Corporate Secretary and Head Legal, and Ms. Christine Ferreira, the Head of Finance and Administration. Thank you.
Would you be inviting those persons to introduce themselves? For the record?
If need be, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Morris, Director.
Morning, everyone. Anthony Tigley, Director.
Good morning, everyone. Howard Dotting, Director.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kirk Henry, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the National Information Technology Company Limited.
Hi, good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Sherwin Ragunanan. I'm the Acting Deputy CEO at iGovTT.
Thank you so very much. Anyone else? That's the final.
Members,
Yes.
I am Janet Peters. I'm the Corporate Secretary and Head Legal.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Morning, everyone. I am Christine Ferreira, Head Finance and Administration, iGovTT.
Anyone else? No one else. Thank you so very much, officials from the National Information and Communication Technology Company. May I at this time invite the representative from the Ministry of Finance Investments Division to make a brief opening statement.
Good morning again. I'd just like to say that the mandate of the Investment Division includes oversight, monitoring, and where necessary, the rationalization of government's equity holdings in commercial enterprises. The division acts on behalf of the Minister of Finance, Corporation Sole, and carries out the corporate function. In carrying out its mandate, the Investments Division utilizes the State Enterprises Performance Monitoring Manual which outlines the framework for compliance with official policy and the monitoring mechanism to be used in assessing such compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. May I now invite the acting permanent secretary in the Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you, Chair. Chairman and members of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, thank you for inviting the Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation to participate in the committee's inquiry into iGovTT, and in particular, the company's audited financial statements for the period 2015 to 2019. We welcome the opportunity, given that the MPADT is currently the line ministry for iGovTT and also fulfilled that role during the period under review. The Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation's remit includes public service modernization and national ICT development, both of which are critical and intrinsically linked enablers of the government's National Development Plan, Vision 2030. The ministry is currently in the process of rolling out and supporting a number of enterprise-wide initiatives that will fulfill the government's undertaking to digitalize the public service, digitize records, develop and implement a national e-identity solution, and enable interoperability or the seamless exchange of information among government agencies. iGovTT, which is a wholly owned state company, is the ministry's primary implementing agency for these and other projects that will contribute to the creation of a digital public service and Trinidad and Tobago's evolution to a digital nation. iGovTT's involvement in this process is consistent with its mandate to provide government ministries, departments, and agencies with ICT consulting and support services. In accordance with the State Enterprise Performance Monitoring Manual, the MPADT maintains regular communication with iGovTT and has continuously sought to improve upon the mechanisms by which the company reports on its operations and overall performance to the ministry, in order to ensure that value for money is being maximized. Chair, in closing, I wish to assure that my team and I undertake to support the committee's inquiry by responding as best as we can to your questions and providing subsequently any additional information that may be required. We also welcome any recommendations that this august committee may proffer as a means of improving the ministry's ability to provide sound oversight to iGovTT. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. May I finally invite either the chairman or the CEO of this iGovTT or National Information and Communication Technology Company Limited to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again. I think that the esteemed acting permanent secretary summarized very succinctly the importance and the role that the National ICT Company Limited, iGov, plays within the ICT space for digital government and the digital transformation agenda. What I would say at this point is that we are entirely thrilled to be able to provide any information that would assist the committee in its deliberations today, and we welcome opportunities to also seek from your deliberations recommendations for our continued improvement. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And again, may I warmly welcome each and everyone from the various ministries and government agencies to this very important meeting of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. May I begin by asking a few questions and then opening the meeting to my other colleagues to intervene. First of all, I want to address the human resources issue, and that is contained in your report on pages 60 to 61. And I'm addressing this to the iGovTT team. iGovTT indicated that its current manpower is insufficient, which corresponds to the overall decline in staff costs during the period under review. It was further stated that the organization is currently operating beneath its approved structure and is barely managing by stretching existing resources and reprioritizing and deferring projects. I have a few questions for iGovTT in this respect. What is the status of this situation that I've just outlined? Is this situation sustainable? How did the manpower shortage arise? Which units had their staff numbers reduced the most? How has the insufficient manpower affected the operations of the company? And my final question under this broad heading of human resources: what relief, if any, is being sought to minimize the effects of a reduced workforce? Mr. Chairman, I don't know if your good self or the CEO would want to address those 6 questions. And if you miss any, kindly remind me so I can restate.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I would begin and I would defer to the CEO as well as any additional inputs from Director Morris, who currently sits as the chair of the HRC, to respond as necessary. I would start by giving a very broad response at first as relates to the questions asked, and that is to indicate first off that the statement that you raised needs to be corrected somewhat, in the sense that within the period under question, one of the things that the company endeavored to do, as you would see from the trajectory outlined with respect to the staffing and the associated costs, was to encourage internal efficiencies and to focus on ensuring that at the times in question, the manpower was as necessary for the operations at hand. In that regard, one of the things that was done to the beginning of that period was to contract as necessary the manpower to better align with respect to what services need to be delivered at that point in time. Moving on from there, having done that, as initiatives were onboarded, a lot of the positions that were previously unfilled, those had to be considered for staffing to support the operations. So I think that in a broad sense, the company was attempting to be judicious with respect to the expenditure, and to ensure that as much as possible, we endeavored to deliver on our mandate as efficiently as possible. So in a broad sense, that is what I would say, and I would now hand over with saying that to the CEO to continue with further specifics. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the overall staffing situation at iGov, we find ourselves, I think, in a position where we are executing more projects we are involved in a greater degree of evangelizing and going out to offer services. So what is happening is that it's almost a good problem to have, because the demand for our services are increasing and coming out from a period where we really was attempting to be judicious in terms of the approach that we took to engaging and having staff in the organization. We see that ramping up, and this accounts for the current stretch that exists within the organization. So in a sense, it's a good problem to have. And with the support of the board, and particularly the HR committee on the board, we have identified a strategy in order to meet the prospective demand that we see, because as I tell the team, the country is in a golden age, a renaissance, where we are seeing an increase in the requests for services and to make use of ICT to enable the operations of the ministry. In terms of your question, Chairman, with regard to the specific units, I would be grateful if you'd allow me to respond in writing. I don't have the particulars before me, but I wish to assure you that yes, we are in a bit of a crunch, but I think it's a crunch of our own making because of the demand for services, which I think the company is now providing. But we do have an approach or a strategy for addressing the shortcomings which may arise as we do our business. I'll defer to Director Morris.
Could you inform this committee what is the current number of employees in iGov, and what is the desirable level given your new strategic plan and direction for 2020-2023?
Yes, Chairman. Currently, we have 117 employees, contracted employees. We are currently in the process of filling 17 vacancies in assorted roles. I must add that the vacancies which we are attempting to fill forms part of the strategy, because what we try to do is to forecast demand and provide the human resource to fill the need, as opposed to having resources on the establishment just waiting for work to come. So we do a bit of forecasting. I mean, it's part art, part science, so that we could be very efficient in terms of the way we deploy our resources and the associated expenditure.
Given your strategic plan for 2020 to 2023, your ideal manpower strength, anticipating, forecasting, and seeking to address the growing demands by agencies on your company. Can you tell this committee what is the ideal staff level that you are striving to achieve in an effort to attain your goals as set out in your strategic plan?
Certainly. I would say that the recruitment that we have, the recruitment exercise that we are currently engaged in, represents our best forecast for our needs. Of course, as with any strategic plan, there's need to do revision, to adjust in response to the environment. And this is where, again, the close relationship, both internally in terms of the HR committee and our line ministry, where we collaborate to fill and adjust as necessary. So I would say for the current period, moving in for the rest of this fiscal, I think the recruitments that we have on tap currently should meet the need, but of course that will be subject to revision based on the needs that would arise coming out of the environment.
Now, can you indicate to this committee how has the insufficient manpower affected the operations of this company?
One of the things that we adopt as a mantra as a company is that we are focused on using our ICT skills to create value, to improve our business process. to make life easier for our citizens as far as possible. What we have attempted to do is to cut back may not be the proper word, but to look at internal projects as the first line of activities that we would want to reduce. So for example, if I have a choice of looking at internal infrastructure item that is not critical, as opposed to providing a service to a ministry, a department, or agency, what we do is that we would focus or divert our resources to meet the need of the client. So internally, what we would have done is to triage projects, and coincidentally with the pandemic, a lot of the internal projects that we may have had on tap, operational items, we would have kind of limited in order to meet the need of the client.
All right, let's look briefly at your strategic plan. And maybe you can summarize for us. Where is Trinidad and Tobago in terms of creating an environment that enables ICT development locally? You want to share with our committee where are we given your strategic plan?
Certainly, Chairman. I'm wondering though if, respectfully, if we would want to allow the MPA-DT to chime in on the broad sector, and I could perhaps coming after to show how our strategic plan aligns with that vision.
Sure.
Thank you.
Chair, could you restate the question, please?
No, I was just asking, in terms of the overall direction of the strategic plan of iGovTT, I wanted to ask, I'm asking, I should say, where is TNT, Trinidad and Tobago, in terms of creating an environment that enables ICT development? Where are we from your perspective?
Okay. As I articulated in my opening remarks, the Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation has been tasked with promoting, stimulating, advancing Trinidad's position as a digital nation. We've rolled out in the last few years an ICT national plan, and we have taken a number of steps working towards digitalizing and digitizing the public service, which is essentially about providing government services, all government services, as many government services, be it to business, be it to citizens, be it amongst government institutions, providing those services online. That is about increasing internal efficiency. It is about minimizing cost. It is primarily about enhancing service delivery, citizen satisfaction, and of course, national development. As CEO iGovTT has said, ICT will play a critical role in that process. Of course, the whole arrival of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 has served as a catalyst for us moving forward. There are a number of things that serve as foundation pieces or critical enablers of ICT development within the country. So for example, education, training and development. We definitely need to develop a critical mass of citizens who are able to play a leading role, a supporting role in the digitalization, in the evolving of Trinidad and Tobago as a digital society, a digital economy. There has to be a growing, increasing level of national willingness to participate in an e-society, in an e-economy, both on the part of businesses, on the part of citizens, because, for example, services, whether it be services from government or services from the private sector, those could be made available online. But is the citizenry sufficiently attuned and willing to participate in online business for one reason or the other. So there's another input that flows from that, the ability of the state and other agencies to develop online mechanisms that are robust, resilient. There are redundancies to deal with failures, systems that enable trust and confidence, for example, protection of citizens' data that may be stored online in government agencies and departments. So there's a multifaceted system or puzzle that needs to be put in place to effect the kinds of ICT development and digital evolution that we want to have. But like I said, I mentioned some of the pieces, upskilling of our citizens and our public employees, a whole change of mindset and awareness in the broader community. There are issues related to legislative reform, because there are a number of pieces of legislation that would fit in and serve as enablers of a digital economy, and those things are being actively looked at. I hope that encapsulates a response.
May I return to the CEO by asking, will the 2020 to 2023 strategic plan address the weakness identified with regard to the lack of agility due to the existing HR structure and low staff morale? I'd like to ask the CEO to address that matter.
Certainly, Chairman. So the 20 to 23 strategic plan really consists of 5 elements. Now, these 5 elements is based on a model for digital transformation, first outlined by MIT. And it is based on hard data and research. And essentially, Pillar 1, we are focused on service delivery excellence. In order to achieve that, there's a focus on ensuring that our infrastructural elements, both hardware and software, are operating as it should. And when we say service delivery excellence, we are looking at it from the perspective of the 3 dimensions of people, process, and technology to put the necessary disciplines in place to ensure that at a base level, we have a foundation to operate from. The other element is a focus on development and the growth of a portfolio of e-government services. Now, this is critical. This is a critical element of the strategic plan, because we need to grow our portfolio of services that is available to our citizens in an online fashion. And this came to the fore during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we were able to push out services, and you saw a willingness on the part of the citizenry to utilize those services. The third element of our strategic plan speaks to support, which the PS just mentioned, the development of governmental interoperability. The days of having to provide the same information to multiple agencies are numbered. And we are focused like a laser beam on ensuring that we address these issues, but it requires some work. The fourth element is that as an organization, and I consider the company to be a sleeping giant in a sense, is to consolidate our position as trusted advisors. So we have been working diligently with ministries, departments, and agencies to be the first port of call for support. Now, finally, to address the whole issue of agility and the human capital that exists, we have identified capacity building to be able to effectively operate in what is commonly known as the 4th Industrial Revolution. Because we realize that the skills that exist today may not be relevant tomorrow, particularly data analytics, the use of artificial intelligence to support the activity of our modernized public sector. And just one more, in terms of morale, when we developed the strategic plan, at the time, prior strategic plan, that was an issue. In fact, at the end of, I think, 2018, one of the things we conduct is to look at the internal voice, the internal customer's voice. In other words, a staff satisfaction survey. It was around 34%, if I'm not mistaken. The last satisfaction survey that we conducted in the height of the pandemic showed that the satisfaction levels within the company had moved to 80%. So we have we have an exciting and enthused bunch of team members at iGovTT, and the challenge for us is to leverage that to create value across the GovNet landscape.
Yeah, and my final question before I open up to my other colleagues is simply this. What do you attribute to be the reason for what has been described as the institutional lag? For example, there appears to be an inability on the part of the company to retain and attract talent. Can you explain to us what is the reason or what are the reasons for this development, and how can we as a committee assist you and iGovTT in moving forward in this particular period where you're seeking to bring about that digital revolution?
Thanks for that question, Chairman. Indeed, I think the mere fact that you asked that question sets us on the path to improving the situation. I'll start by saying that. The institutional lag really is a function of the culture that exists, not only that existed, let me say, I'm speaking in the past tense, that existed at this iGovTT, at this state enterprise. And it is what I like to call the classical or the waterfall approach to managing. Now, again, if you look, I like to look at the data, I like to look at the research. And the research says that the companies, the organizations that succeed in the landscape today are those that are agile, open to change, is not focused from a management leadership perspective on command and control, but more on collaboration and coaching. It is about using small I innovation in everything. In other words, fostering a climate of innovation. When a member of the team makes a suggestion, has an idea, there's a round table space that we could bring that to the fore and utilize. And those are the things that we have been practicing at iGovTT, because we identified changing the culture and creating a digital mindset as critical to us achieving our mandate. So I think that is something that needs to be encouraged, and it should not just be at iGovTT, because the example I would give is during the pandemic, we operated even more efficiently, and we did it in a remote fashion. And I think it's an example that if we could replicate and share with the wider state enterprise sector in our country, I think it is something that could add value. In terms of the whole issue of retention and attraction is a challenge. We try to make the work interesting. We try to make use of the technology. We have deployed things like what I would say, I don't want to say bleeding edge, but leading edge chatbots, the use of AI, data analytics in our work. And that has encouraged a lot of the younger folk to participate and say, because they want to have bragging rights about deploying things. But I think if we consider Maslow and that pyramid, we need to make it attractive, because in this current climate, IT and IT professionals and tech talent is at a premium. So we are competing with other sectors, and we have to find ways, not just simply through compensation packages, etc., but to encourage and to keep the talent that we have, because we have suffered a bit of poaching. But I think what needs to happen, and I know our line ministry is doing it, they are making a concerted effort to work on culture and to support our efforts to bring the compensation package in line with what happens in the private sector. Because we have, Chairman, we have lost a lot of talent to consulting firms. And I if I may respectfully, Chairman, suggest, I don't know if our chairman or the chairman of the HRC, our committee, would like to chime in.
Sure.
I would just say that the CEO has very succinctly summarized the challenges that are faced by the company, and that the board, the management, and the ministry are actively working towards providing sustainable solutions towards. As the CEO has pointed out, yes, there are matters of compensation, there are matters of motivation and so on. But given the environment we operate in, and as mentioned by the acting PS before the pandemic catalyst, it's a really interesting time, and it's a notable challenge to attract and retain the necessary staff. In other words, there are things that we can do, and there are things that in the framework we currently aren't able to do. But I think that looking at some of the evidence, as the CEO has suggested, for example, the proof is in the pudding, the service rollout, the sorts of projects that are being undertaken at significantly reduced cost to the country, and the fact that over the last few years, one thing that I'm saying that I'm very heartened to see is the increased internal development of solutions, as well as the increased interaction with various stakeholders. So, for example, you spoke before about the environment. You asked about the environment, and one aspect of that would be the youth, and the fact that they have a critical part to play within this entire development thrust moving forward. And one of the things that iGovTT has been pretty focused on over the last few years is engaging the youth, as evidenced by our HackTT initiative, where they work in partnership. It's a multi-stakeholder model. They work with MDAs, ministries, divisions, and agencies, so identify certain problems that and prioritize accordingly. Through a bit of competition and mentorship with the private sector, the students are able to help with the development of proofs of concepts, which can then be deployed as solutions for the recipient ministries. So that is an ongoing, I would say, petri dish model, but those are the sorts of common eye things that the CEO is referring to. And I would say that from wearing my other hat at the university, students are extremely excited about these sort of opportunities to participate in national service when they do come around. So on that side, you get that level of enthusiasm, and you're able to fill the pipeline. But we also face the challenges for the more experienced members to contribute at higher levels as well. I do not know if, permit me to just pass it to Director Morris if she has anything else to add, but I think that with what we've said, that should hopefully answer your question.
Before that, Mr. Chairman,
yes,
would you permit me an opportunity to make an intervention at this juncture?
Well, I will just ask you to hold for one moment to allow Ms. Renuka Sagram Singh Suklal to make her intervention, and I shall immediately revert to you thereafter.
I am more than gratified, Mr. Chairman.
No problem. Mrs. Renuka Sagram Singh, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, I heard the point being made just now about young people, and we'd all appreciate that very important to young people is Wi-Fi, battery life, and data. I can speak about my children in particular. That being said, my questions at this point is relative to our TT Wi-Fi initiative. If the committee can give us some information as to how long, and I guess you would know amongst yourself who would be the appropriate person to answer to this question. I just want a general sense as to how long has the project been ongoing, and the success that you've been able to, or any sort of information relative to the TT Wi-Fi project.
Sure. I would just ask for the acting DCO, who operate Moonlight, is also our head of infrastructure, to respond,
Okay.
please. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. To the question on the TT Wi-Fi project, this has always been an ongoing project. It has been ongoing. It was implemented firstly in 2015, where the phase one execution of that project saw Wi-Fi implementation on several PTSC buses. Since then, PTSC has taken over the project and they have been running with their own Wi-Fi initiative to further outfit their fleet. Separate and apart from that, the Ministry of Public Administration has been, through the Telecommunications Authority, has been using the Universal Services Fund to further expand this in a phase 2 initiative, which is where we are now, expanding that beyond PTSC to transportation hubs, maxi taxi hubs, etc., bus stations, the ports as well as waiting rooms in hospitals and in the libraries as well. So the anticipation of it is to have Wi-Fi available in public spaces for general consumption by citizens. There's a simple splash page which gives you the information and disclaimers about, be safe about your utilization of the service. Make sure that you don't utilize web pages or services that may be capturing private information, etc. Because there is an exposure that you may have, seeing that this is a shared public space that you'll be utilizing this. As well, the Ministry of Public Administration, through us, we are working together with them in the development of community access centers, which is also going to introduce Wi-Fi services and computing infrastructure at various community access centers or community centers at the different locations. Right now, we are undertaking with the ministry 3, and I think there are 9 more centers currently lined up, separate and apart from, I believe there were 10 or 13 that were done prior to this stage. So there are various implementation stages of getting that public Wi-Fi in place. As I said, we started with the public transport. We have moved now to the transportation hubs, hospital waiting rooms, libraries, which is in a state of deployment presently. And we are also working on the community access centers to have that also available.
Okay, fantastic. So let's talk dollars and cents now, right? Would you be in a position at all to give us an estimated cost of this TT Wi-Fi project since its inception? Now, I know it's noted that you said the project would have started from 2015, and 2015, of course, to 2021 is a significant period. But in a nutshell, would you be able to identify to us what has been the overall cost to the country thus far?
I don't have that detail before me, but that is something that we could always get back to the committee.
Okay, fantastic. Now, how many phases? I know you, well, of course, you would have gone through, speaking of when you spoke about the inception of the project on the PTSC buses and so on, and would have taken us to where we are at currently. I guess that would, in essence, you were explaining the phases of the project, right?
Correct.
I had another question, of course, relative to, again, cost and the second phase of the project, but you said you didn't have that information. So I look forward at least to that cost information being provided to us. So thank you very much relative to the questions I had on the TT Wi-Fi. To the entire committee, my other question now is relative to accounts receivables and prepayments based on the submissions that were submitted. So again, I'm sure, gentlemen, you all would know who would be most, prepared to answer my questions relative to that. Now, what I noted is that of iGovTT total outstanding trade receivables of, I believe, $12,313,313. Yeah, let's say above 12 million, right? As of February 20, 2021, it's noted that 8,310,000 thereabout relates to debts owed for a period more than 360 days. Now, this debt is approximately, in my calculation, I'm not too good in maths, but it's approximately 67.5% of the company's total trade receivables. My question is, why is 67.5% of the outstanding debt more than 360 days old? Would you all be able to answer that question?
Yes. If you look at just briefly, and I will ask for support from the head of finance, who's on the call, you notice that I'm not sure if in your schedule there, you'd have seen that it is associated with the Ministry of Science and Technology for project work associated with what the head of infrastructure just outlined in terms of community access centers. So of the existing trade receivable, you'll see that approximately 7 million of that is associated with a ministry, an entity that currently does not exist. And I'll provide, if you want details of the breakdown, we have that, which I can share. The other major receivable over 360 really is assorted projects that would have executed and where we continue to attempt to retrieve the funds. But I think the big ticket item there really comes out of the Ministry of Science and Technology. The other thing I would want to point out is that if you looked at the schedule of our aged our trade receivables, you'll see that really and truly the bulk of it is associated with that major entity, and it really came about. The occasion for it, I would want to defer perhaps to the head of finance because to provide some further details regarding how it got to that. But before I do, just to add that what we are doing, what the company is engaged in currently, particularly I have a finance committee that is very focused on this, is ensuring that as we move forward, these types of account receivables do not appear on our books because of the associated implications for IFRS 9, etc., etc., etc. And I will now just hand over to the head of finance to add some color to what I just said, member, respectfully.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. The CEO is correct in that the large part of the receivable is actually the Ministry of Science and Technology, which is no longer in existence. And again, it's the community access centers, which we had invoiced for, and that was quite a while back, 2015. We still try to recover that amount. It's been provided for as per the IFRS 16, IFRS 9, and we continue to try to collect. The other outstanding receivables, again, it's for ministries, and we continue to see if we can collect, but they are mainly provided for. Current receivables are not a problem. We follow through, and we have been quite successful in the collection of those receivables.
Okay, fantastic. Now, as we have finance here, a question. I noted that there was a debt identified that's still owed to the company by Francola John, I believe it is. Would you be able to shed some light? So this is an individual. So you would have explained about debts owed by other state agencies, but this particular individual name, would you be able to provide any sort of information? I recall it's a Francola John. This is, of course, based on your response, the submissions made by iGovTT under the header Accounts Receivable and Prepayments. I believe it was in response to question 1 of that particular header, but I did recall coming across that name, Francola John. Would you be able to shed some light on that debt that is owed by this individual?
Yes, this is a litigation matter we have ongoing right now, and we had sent it to debt collector, and we had been receiving small amounts. So the amount has actually been reduced, and we continue to follow through with that.
So the matter is currently being litigated, or is it that you're, because I know you said it's a litigation.
It's just a debt collector.
It's in debt collector. Okay, excellent. Chairman, that's the extent of my questions relative to the account receivable and prepayments. Do I have some more time, Chair? or would I be imposing on my other colleagues?
Well, I'll come back. I'll hold your thoughts.
Okay.
We'll come back to you. I'll now invite the Honorable Fitzgerald Hines to intervene at this time.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, one of the purposes, as you identified, of this committee is really in this scrutiny, in this process of scrutiny, to identify shortcomings, problems, challenges, and we make recommendations largely with a view of having them fixed. I have had a look on this company, and I have noted that in the most recent management letter of 2020 from PKF, that accounting unit of high repute, they identified that they have found no notable, my word, or reportable, the accountant's word, or any serious issues around the financial statements and so on of this entity. This entity, Mr. Chairman, was born in 2009. I'm not going to politicize the issue, but I took note of that date and the vision. And from all that I've heard from the CEO this morning and from the chairman of the board and so on, I think we are on to a very good thing. And I think the people of Trinidad and Tobago ought to recognize that. What we have in front of us this morning, Mr. Chairman, is a good thing, a great thing. And I see the need for us to protect it because the mandate from the reports that we have read, and the public doesn't always understand this. And as I speak with the public in mind. And with that, I urge the officials before us to speak, not with Chairman Mark, he's a very learned man, or Fitzgerald Hines, or Renuka Sagram Singh, but with the public in mind. I think the public ought to understand what this is about. And I read in those reports, of course, this company was born to service MDAs, ministries, divisions, and agencies. It doesn't go outside of that. It is not a private sector operator, but it is bringing a private sector ethos, modernizing the entire government platforms, ICT platform, across Trinidad and Tobago in the public sector, in the ministries, in the divisions, and the agencies. And I heard the CEO speak about elements of poaching. In the context of us protecting us, we are like a sitting duck. We have these people working in the state sector, iGovTT, doing wonderful and necessary things. If any country, including ours, has to progress, has to move on in this digital world, what they're doing is a great thing. And I want to ask the CEO with some element of candor, whether if this mandate is broadened to include activity in the private sector, to do business with other elements, whether that should make any substance. This is a deeply philosophical issue. I understand this is a state agency, but I'm just asking for the country's benefit, whether that is a matter ever came in contemplation, and if so, how might that make them more competitive, be able to pay their staff and their operators more potently, I can't find a better word, Mr. Chairman, so as to protect us from the poaching that we heard from the CEO subsist. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Member. I think I agree that it is a deeply philosophical question. It is something that the board and management, we have had extensive discussions around. But I just want to add another dimension to that. Where the country sits currently, particularly the public sector, our mandate really is about supporting Ministry of Public Admin and Digital Transformation to modernize the public sector. And the reality is we have a lot of work to do. And while the entrepreneur in yours truly would relish the opportunity to go out and compete, I think the mission at hand really, at least in the short to medium term, should be focused on enabling our MDAs, because it will have a lot of rippling effects to benefit first and foremost citizens, as well as the way we are able to do business. And indeed, it would also bode well for the country when you look external to our shores and investors look in at the level of development that exists, because it will enhance our risk profile. So I think I agree 100% and would relish the opportunity for the company to go out and to compete. But I think the mission in the short to medium term has to be squarely focused on enabling the activities of our ministries to make life better for our citizens. That is how I would respond, member.
Right, and I do appreciate that. I see that voracious creature that is business, the private sector, they may not be so minded, you know, and they look on you, and we are at serious risk because for a few dollars more, they'll take your best constantly. And that, I'm sure, partly explains some of the turnovers that we would have seen earlier alluded to in this discussion. Let me move on in a little bit so that the public could better understand. I am aware, and they need to be aware, that you, iGovTT, would have played a very substantial role in causing the children, the young people of Trinidad and Tobago, and I speak as Minister of Youth Development and National Service to some extent, to have better access to online education facilities, necessary as that is, especially in the context of the COVID-19 experience. I would like you to tell this committee what role you, iGovTT, played in this, and the role you played in making this thing happen in the education sector, at least in Trinidad and Tobago. I understand that you played a role in the procurement of certain devices and so on. Could you tell us about that role so we could better understand how you proceed along the lines of your pillars, your strategic plan, and so on?
Yes, member. Indeed, the company, from the onset, we were behind the scenes. In terms of when we speak specifically about education, we supported the work done with respect to enabling the online learning to happen through the network engineering activities that would allow it to actually happen. So, and typically, and I really appreciate this question, because typically the citizens or the public just see the results, the outputs. But iGovTT, almost from the get-go, was involved in the infrastructure elements in terms of supporting the wonderful team across at the Ministry of Education to deliver continued learning in an online fashion. Additionally, we are involved in the procurement activity associated with the devices, laptops, tablets, that the government has engaged in to make the devices, the peripherals available to bridge that gap that exists. And we were involved from inception, part of planning in terms of the procurement activities, and I dare say that we are actually engaged in that procurement, which is happening at lightning speed, as I like to say. We are also involved in activities surrounding looking at providing Wi-Fi in a portable fashion, Wi-Fi devices, so that the disadvantaged children, in our midst, the government saw it fit to bridge that, to fill that gap, to meet a need. And again, we are involved very closely in the procurement, in the specification, in the planning of the activity, and that is currently underway and is approaching a very a stage where it's coming to an end. In terms of internet capability, we are looking currently at using our pipe, our internet pipe, to distribute internet to secondary schools, to make it available for people in the community, in the schools, not just the students, to have access and to make use, to bridge that digital divide. And that is in addition to the day-to-day that we do to support from a business development, a consulting perspective in the underlying ministries, ultimately geared at providing a service, in this case, to a student or a teacher, in as they go about attempting to educate our children. And those, I don't know if the chairman would like to add anything, but essentially that just represents just some of the activities that we were involved in during the period as it relates to education, member.
Thank you very much. I want to, my next question has to do with, I think you have about 11 strategic pillars that you have established for yourself. Am I correct? I'm trying to get the document in front of me. I think it's
5 member.
5 of them? Yes?
Yes, member, 5.
Could you tell the public what you mean by pillar and what they are so that they can understand?
Certainly.
Because my next question will touch and concern that, but I don't want this conversation to be between you and I alone. The public is sharing this with us.
Certainly. At the very heart of what we do is to seek an alignment with government policy. Vision 2030 outlines some developmental objectives of the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And from that, cascading downward, you have the National ICT Blueprint 2018-2022 produced by the government. We are completely guided by those strategies. Falling on from that, we have identified, and just to be clear, let me just outline the vision for 2030.
Thank you.
Which speaks to improving productivity through quality infrastructure and transportation. The infrastructure bit is where we are squarely focused on, making use of the digital technology. Putting people first, nurturing our greatest asset, promoting good governance and service excellence, building a globally competitive business sector, valuing and enhancing our environment. From that, we would have developed 5 strategic pillars to give life to the government's vision. 1, to focus on service delivery excellence. We want to utilize the digital technologies to allow our public service to deliver services to our citizens. That is almost the raison d'etre for our existence. The second element, and for example, at the start of the pandemic, iGovTT was involved in the rollout of an online payment facility that allowed citizens to go online for the first time and pay for a birth certificate. So what that allowed for was that citizens did not have to leave their homes to face the potential of the pandemic, but to execute and to get. We have instances where citizens in the diaspora, as far afield as Israel, would have made requests for birth certificates completely online and had it delivered via TT Post to them. So that is something that is one of our pillars, but we feel that there's more that we could do. The second item, or the second pillar, is to focus on business development and the growth of our portfolio of e-government services. You would see in recent times, we would have assisted our Ministry of National Security with the travel exemption application, which we developed to make life easier and to support the ministry. We have developed an e-appointment service so that people, our citizens, don't necessarily have to be on the phone and appearing in our ministry and putting themselves at risk during this pandemic time. We have developed Employee TT application, which we use at iGovTT, which allows citizens to apply for jobs that exist in this space. We are focused on improving the number of services that we are able to provide via the internet. The third element is to support the development of interoperability with court. This is a huge one for us. The PS would have mentioned it, and it really is about improving the the maturity of underlying systems at various ministries to allow for the sharing or the passing of relevant data to allow citizens to conduct business at individual ministries without having to move from one place to the next, and ultimately to stay at their machine, their PC, their laptop, their mobile device, and conduct business. The fourth pillar is to consolidate our position as the trusted advisor to GOAT. Now, we think that is very important. We are about to embark on a program of evangelism where we continue in an accelerated rate to interact with various ministries to provide support in terms of developing the governance arrangements to run their IT, all with the goal of improving the way they do business and deliver to citizens. Because at the heart of everything we do is what value does it bring to the ministry? But more importantly, the value it adds to the life of a citizen. Finally, capacity building. We need to develop internal skills. We need to ensure that we future-proof our human capital, because there are lots of emerging technologies, not pie in the sky. I'm speaking to things like data analytics, the use of artificial intelligence to support public sector service delivery. Those are the 5 pillars, all of which are aligned to government's 2030 vision, which drives the activity of iGovTT member.
You know, as I come to my conclusion on this round, all that you have said, Mr. CEO, and I'm very happy I asked that initial part of the question, because all that you have said, I am aware it touches issues of national security. It touches issues of the way the police conduct affairs on the road with tickets and issues concerning a major sector, the licensing department, the Registrar General's office. People will tell you now that they can access a birth certificate in 15, 20 minutes. All of these things, you are really like the grease that oils the wheels of this society, the government platform, making the quality of life, issues of national security, issues of the ease of doing business, assisting in that way the private sector, although you are a state entity. And I really am happy that I asked the first part of my question. The second part of my question was for you to tell the public how then, in the context of these pillars, you would have made Trinidad and Tobago safer, healthier, more accessible to education and better. But you have already answered them. So I will now pass the forum over to the chairman again so that he could continue. Not before I say, I am really genuinely proud of iGovTT as a citizen, as a member of parliament. And I can be justifiably proud based on your record from 2009, we're in 2021 now, and the portents for the future, provided that you all stay on pillars and on track. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Amrita member, Amrita Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again. My question goes to either the PS or iGovTT. Now, in the submission that we would have received, I saw reference was being made to GovNet. And for the listening public, could you just clarify or explain to us what GovNet is?
Remember, GovNet, if you recall, when I mentioned the pillars, one of the things we spoke about is service excellence. And when we talk about transformation, one of the elements of digital transformation is the notion of having a solid or operational excellence and a solid piece of infrastructure. GovNet represents, it was set up in 2009. It represents a core piece of infrastructure that hosts, allows for office productivity, and some core services that any organization, any business organization would require. And it revolves around enterprise collaboration, automation, security in terms of safe browsing, etc., and acts essentially as an information gateway for services. Ministries utilize GovNet for their collaboration, their email services, intranet services, etc. We also use a delivery mechanism to provide internet, safe internet to secondary schools. And this piece of infrastructure, following a shared services model, was established in 2009. The plan being to have a shared service available for ministries, departments, and agencies to utilize so that their internal IT departments will not be focused on what we would call foundational services. And they would be focused more on the IT services that are more value adding to the business of the ministry. And this is what GovNet represents. I don't know if my acting DCU wants to add anything, but that essentially represents the concept of the government network infrastructure.
Okay, so given that it is expected to be something that integrates all ministries using your internet services, right? I see that one of the challenges that you all identified in the submission is that there is an adoption of a siloed approach by ministries, departments, and agencies, which impacts upon interoperability and the pursuit of a whole of government approach to the integration of enterprise-wide solutions. So tell me, is it that GovNet TT has not been able to take up maximum utilization across all ministries? Is that the case?
I would say at the time, in terms of the period that we in question here that we are examining, it was, I would say, suboptimal in terms of usage. However, the caveat now is with the establishment of the MPADT, one of the things that is happening there's a renewed focus, and perhaps the PS would speak to this, on the whole notion of the governance of enterprise IT. And governance of IT is critical to translating the strategic intent of the policymakers, our government, down into the operational reality of the various ministries, departments, and agencies. And that's just a fancy way of saying what is intended actually happens in the operations. So it was suboptimal in my view. What I am seeing, and maybe, I think it's twofold. I think the pandemic, as well as the adjustment, the focus of MPADT to digital transformation, you are seeing an increased uptick in the use of the GovNet, combined with the recent work that we did. MPA, the Ministry of Public Admin and Digital Transformation, would have supported a wholesale upgrade of the facility to provide improved services, greater bandwidth, etc., a whole host of services. I would posit that we are seeing an uptake, and it bodes well as individual ministries start to create more systems. They will make use more or greater and greater use of that piece of infrastructure. I hope that answers your question, member.
Yeah, and it causes me to think of another question. So right now, what the utilization rate is by existing ministries, and where you intend that utilization rate to go, given the initiatives that you all are deploying at the moment?
The current utilization is that all ministries in some form or fashion make use of a service associated with GovNet in terms of sites or participating in the exchange services that we offer, etc. The utilization, tongue in cheek, I would say that I would like to see 100% utilization, because it represents what I dare say is a shared services model. And if we talk about value for money and the benefit of economies of scale, that is automatic if we move in that direction. If you look in the private sector, that is a model of choice that is used for IT services delivery, a shared services approach. And we are following along that rate. In terms of the I could tell you, we have over 27,000 users who make use, for example, of our enterprise agreement. In terms of the number of sites, it's hundreds, and I could get that information, the stats. I don't know if, I suspect my head of infrastructure, the acting DCO, would have that in his head, but we could provide specific statistics to you in writing, if that is okay with you.
Yes, I will appreciate that. Through you, Mr. Chair, I want to pursue my line of questioning with respect to GovNet TT. Now, I see in one of your submissions, one of the appendices, you would have given a breakdown of the contract period of GovNet TT. And from September 2010 to 2021, the cost of this infrastructure has been just over $1 billion in terms of managed services. Could you explain to us, and I see that the vendor is TSCT and Fujitsu. So could you explain to us or let us know what is the percentage that is being paid to TSCT and to Fujitsu?
The Fujitsu TSTT it's an alliance in terms of infrastructure and communication services. The breakdown, I will endeavor to provide that, because even as I look at my notes here, I do not have that specific breakdown for you. But I before I promise, let me ask my acting DCU if he's familiar with if we have that or what it would take to get. But either way, we will endeavor to provide it to you.
Okay. Now, GovNet TT, right? Now, I understand based on what you're saying and based on the submission that phase 2 was implemented in 2010. When was phase 1? Because it seems as if there was something before 2010 that led up to phase 2.
Yes.
So
let me
no. just continue.
Sure.
And also, I see in your submission that you said that the platform upgraded with scheduled completion on May 2021, right? So you expect that to be completed. But at the same time, through my research, I saw from the Ministry of Public Administration website, they issued a media release on the 5th of July 2017 related to this same GovNet matter. And I'm reading from the text here. It says that right. It says here that GovNet 3.0 issued in 2014, which had been expected to cost $234 million and $43 million, respectively, but which had to be abandoned due to several issues. So could you provide some clarification? Is it that there are some aspects of GovNet TT that was totally abandoned and you all started from scratch again? Because my concern lies here, because up to that point of 2017, $600 million was spent on this infrastructure, and that is just taken into consideration 2015 to 2017. And based on what you're nodding, it seems as if something existed on GovNet TT prior to 2010 as well. So just provide some clarification for the committee, please.
Certainly. I would ask for some support here from my head of infrastructure.
Sure, no problem. Mr. Murray, just to answer your question, so phase 1 for GovNet was conceptualized back in 1998. It was actually deployed and went live between 2003 and 2004. And just to give a bit of an understanding, I mean, some of the technologies that existed then did not exist today. So at that point in time, the infrastructure and the solution was very distributed, which meant that at each ministry, there was actually a large number of devices and servers and infrastructure that were placed independently of any other ministry. So for example, Ministry of Education had their own infrastructure associated with Ministry of Education. Ministry of Public Administration had their own infrastructure associated with Ministry of Infrastructure. At that point in time, if you would recall, the communication services that were available would have been frame relay dial-up services, right? So we didn't even have the facilities as we do now with some of the high-speed bandwidth that we do have presently. Coming out from that period, 2004 towards 2007, there was a upgrade that was done to the tail end of the solution, wherein the advanced communication technologies were brought in. So we started to move away from the frame relay, we started to move away from the dial-up services towards ADSL and also towards Metro Ethernet. And I know I'm getting a little bit technical here, but it's just to show the progression of the network. So in 2009, as CEO would have mentioned, the phase 2 that came into play started to reconsolidate the infrastructure that was once distributed. So instead of having a sprawl of computing infrastructure sitting at each individual ministries, all of that was backhauled into 2 data centers. So at that data center, we consolidated all the email services, all the domain services, DNS services, etc., the internet services as well, rather than have it terminated at each individual ministries, were controlled and terminated via these data centers as well. So we started to benefit as well from consolidation and that sharing of infrastructure, which is the fundamental principle of a shared services model. From 2010 to present, we would have been utilizing the platform as it would have been implemented in 2010 up until 2017. And so the item that you just raised in terms of the 2014 publication, that would have been the termination of the standard period for the services contract, and we would have gone out to tender, right? The tender in the estimates roughly came up to the numbers that you were talking about in terms of $250 million. And at that point in time, there were several challenges with funding, etc., and moving ahead with the solution that would have terminated those procurement activities. What there was an agreement for, and this is the basis under which we are still operating, is a cabinet decision that identified the month-to-month continuation of the service with the same contractor alliance, TSCT Fujitsu. In 2017, the contractor alliance, both TSCT and Fujitsu, made an offer to the ministry, which was later formalized, that through their own cost, they would venture to upgrade the entire platform. So all the servers, all the networking devices, bandwidth was increased as well. Security devices were upgraded. Everything associated with the services that existed on the platform were upgraded. And at this point in time, we are just on the tail end of closing off those. Largely in part, the new services are in place. There's a tail end for the project, which will deal with service testing and sign-offs, etc. But that is where we are. So our clients, which is the public service, they've really been benefiting from enhanced and upgraded platform from I would say, the tail end of 2019 into the beginning of 2020. And we've been slowly and incrementally upgrading and updating on those.
So therefore, then, would you say that the current architecture is fully up to date, and what also is being done to ensure that whatever you have in place is not bordering on obsolete? Because as you know, information technology and IT solutions and all these IT things are quite agile and developing quite rapidly as time progresses.
Right. So the arrangement that we have, and with the upgrade of the platform that was recently done, we have regular reviews of that. We have regular reviews of the platform and the technologies to ensure that obsolescence is not met. Right. Coming up to 2017, when the offer was made, we were actually at that point of technology obsolescence, where a lot of the devices were coming to end of life. A lot of the products and the software technology that we were using were towards end of life as well. And now where we are actually at the current versions of all of those. So for those of the members here or the listening public who would be familiar with some of the Microsoft email technologies, recently Microsoft advised that there is a vulnerability that existed within their email solution. And we were at the point of the latest version, which would have had all the patches and all the plugs in place to ensure that those vulnerabilities do not impact us. So we keep, there's a continuous improvement on that and continuous review on that platform to ensure that we do not end up in that state again, where we are faced with obsolescence issues.
And through the chair, if you just permit me just to add, member, one thing. This is where if one of the things that we have been focused on is establishing a governance arrangement where, in terms of the improving process maturity, we would have, one of the questions that we responded to was the question about enterprise risk management framework. And we take a risk-based approach to managing the infrastructure, both hardware and software, and the disciplines of risk management as it relates to IT and maintaining the usability of the underlying infrastructure is something that we are paying close attention. And the PS, our PS, we have a very close working relationship with the ministry. And I know for a fact that one of the things that is happening is an enhanced governance arrangement where there is specific working committees established to monitor and to work with ministries as well as iGov to ensure that that number one risk, which is sadly often the case in governments around the world, is not confined to Trinidad, where we deploy plant and equipment and the focus on maintenance is not there. That is something that we hope to be a thing of the past. And we have even identified it in our strategic plan as an item that we will be focused on. Thank you.
So there is an existing contractual arrangement to ensure that the hardware is continuously upgraded as time progresses.
Yes, there is.
Okay, thank you. Now, I saw in your submission that you all drew reference to an internal audit that was done on the procurement audit of GovNet TT 3.0, and you all referenced it as Appendix F11. However, I did not receive that on our end. So could you kindly double check on your end and resubmit it to us, please?
Certainly. Apologies for that.
No problem. Now, earlier on in the conversation, hold on. Mr. Chair, could I proceed or would you like me to pause at this moment?
Yeah, can you pause so I can go on to Russian Parry? And I'll come back to you in round 2. Mr. Russian Parry?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm having some bandwidth issues here, so if I start to stutter at any point in time, Chair, and you lose me, you can move on to someone else. But firstly, let me just say thank you to iGovTT for the submissions. It was very interesting. It was a very interesting read. I too want to join Member Hines in focusing on the importance of iGovTT as this enabling arm of the government to push ICT services throughout the government sector. I think after farmers in this country, you guys are the next most important team, because outside of food, data connectivity, ICT is what is going to keep us connected to the rest of the world. So I have a couple of comments that I would like to make based on the submissions and a couple of questions. And I'll try to be very, very quick. Now, I went through the management reports, the document entitled National Information and Communication Technology Company Limited Management Letters from Auditors. Now, I did notice for 2019 and 2020, there were no commentary for management response. I do not know if for those 2 periods there were no commentary or it did not end up in the report. Perhaps the CEO can advise on that. There were a couple things that stood out to me in the 5 management reports that I read. One primarily went with the issue of asset management, and there were some issues over the period of time in terms of tracking assets, issues of serial numbers, things that will manage the movement of assets at iGovTT. It brought to my concern, how do you manage warranties and so on if there is no way to track equipment, warranties, which is something critical, how you would have dealt with that. The other thing that I saw were the issues of short staffing, which the chairman had dealt with. And again, in 2017, you had commentary on asset management. In 2018, asset register came up again. And in 2018, they spoke about the need for the provision of an accounting manual Now, the fact that in that management report, they were very vocal in insisting on this manual. It spoke to the previous reports about some weaknesses in internal controls. So the question that I have to ask based on the management reports, for the period that is under consideration now, which these management reports spoke to, how are you today in 2021 with regards to the issues around the asset register, managing of warranties, perhaps security for the equipment, because if you don't know what you have, where it is, you don't know when it leaves the building. What has happened so far with that? What is the status on the accounting manual, which the auditor looked at for 2018? And what happened in 2019 and 20 with regards to concerns for management response?
Thank you, Member. I will lean on the support of the head of finance. Just before I hand over, though, I would say that we would have undertaken a special exercise in 2018, 2019 to address those concerns, those exceptions which were noted. And we did in special internal audits to also take a deep dive into it to make sure that our bases were covered there. So we were pleasantly surprised for the last 2 years when the external auditors would have basically given us a clean bill of health, recognizing some of those shortcomings they would have identified, which we really did pay some attention to. But I will just ask the head of finance to provide some additional details, please.
Yes, good morning. The asset register and all the issues that were identified by our internal auditors we have addressed. And you could see that with our external audit, these issues were not identified as issues because they were no longer there. In terms of the warranties, these are managed by our internal audit and internal auditor and of IT. And to date, we are just about to put in a software package which will help us monitor all our assets in the company.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to go back to Mr. Henry. Mr. Henry, I listened to your response when Member Hines asked his last bit of questions, and your response, you spoke on the pillars and you connected to the 2030 vision, government vision, in terms of how do you connect what you guys at iGovTT is doing and what you're going to be doing well into 2030. Now, if I were to draw your attention to your submission on page 14 of your submission, where you provided a SWOT analysis, which is headed SWOT analysis 1st of October 2020 to the 30th of September 2023. And under the section of threats, you identify the second item as a lack of national policies. Now, can you just explain to this committee, taking into consideration what you said concerning the pillars and its connection to the Vision 2030 plan, what do you mean by lack of national policy as a threat to your organization?
Our mandate, and thank you for that, Member, our mandate really is to support the implementation, the vision of our ministry as it relates to the modernization of the public sector and utilizing digital technologies. One of the things that we need to standardize on or to get going is the establishment of policies to govern the use of IT at a national level in the ministries. So currently, for example, we would make recommendation, we would make standard, we would propose standards, we'd contribute. But in some instances, we have, I think the application of some of our recommendations, because it's not set as policy, is suboptimal. And we have to do some work there to ensure that we have compliance. And I'll give you an example. If you look at the Auditor General reports doing ITGCs, IT general control audits across ministries, you would see where there are disparate procedures. There's no harmonization of some structures, certain disciplines which I know you'd be familiar with, capacity management, backup and restoration policies, handling of data, even fixed asset management as it relates to ICTs. They're not standardized. It's, for want of a better descriptor, it's a bit of a wild, wild west, but it's a work in progress. And this is something that we feel that is important for us, or for the country to get right, to enable us to adequately deliver. So I think that is, that I think.
So let me ask you this, right?
Mm-hmm.
If one of the threats also was that MDAs can circumvent mandate to use iGov services. Now, I from my experience, I mean, I've been in the business for some time as well, and I understand the challenges in some of these ministries. But why would you think that these MDAs choose to circumvent the mandate, right? Is it that they don't trust the organization called iGovTT, or they don't trust the competency level that you may have, or it is just, as you know, in the IT world, it's just the clash of egos, and they choose to go their own way? What would you say would lead to that?
Speaking, speaking frankly, I think it may very well be a combination of all of the above. When you're in group environments, you always have, speaking from my experience outside of the public sector and the private sector, where you have subsidiary IT managers, they tend to have their egos and they want to run their shop their own way and they want to do their own thing. There may be instances where people may not have confidence. That is a reality, but it is our responsibility, and that's why we identified it in our strategic plan, to build that confidence. And I dare say during the pandemic, this pandemic period, I think that we are on an upward trajectory, because in fact, all of the ministries in some form or fashion have been coming to us for support. And I think a good indicator is that they're involving iGov, they're coming to us and they're making the demands and the requests through MPA, sometimes directly, to support new initiatives that they want to go with. Whereas in the past, they would do their thing and then they would call us on the back end to solve issues that they may not have envisioned. So I think it's a compendium. I think the latter is on the decline, because, I mean, I can tell you that even some ministries attempt to poach some of the staff that, you know, that we have. Hope that answers your question, member.
I want to
reject. What about the issues?
Oh my God.
Let me ask this. I mean, I know my colleague, Mr. Hines, loves to interject, but let me just finish and then he can interject as much as he needs to. Do you think the fact that, or let me ask the question this way: when an MDA or any one of the MDAs decide that they want to go forward with a project, the funding or the capex for these projects, does it remain in the MDA, or is it transferred to you at iGovTT and then you execute while controlling the budget?
Currently, what happens is that the MDAs, the ministry, they would have the budget, they would get the capex for the project. We would form contractual arrangements. I don't know if he dropped. Are you still there?
No, I'm here. Okay. I'm just having bandwidth issues.
Sure. Yeah. So what happens is that we form contractual arrangements with our partner ministry to execute the project, and what we do is we have drawdowns based on the progress of the project, and we invoice based on milestones or deliveries of the project.
But do you think if you had more control over the finance, or what you refer here to as a bit of autonomy on that, it may make the execution of the projects a lot easier or a lot more manageable than you have to be tossing back and forward for funding between those MDAs? Would that help?
Now, that is another philosophical question, and I will answer it this way. The same issue arises in the private sector, particularly in group IT scenarios, where you have subsidiary IT organizations asking they want to masters of their own destiny kind of thing. The thing is, though, the MDA, or as we say in the private sector, the accountable executive in the business, the IT essentially should be operating as an enabler of business projects. And the ministry ultimately, or the business entity, should be ultimately accountable for the execution of a project. Now, there are instances, for example, in the case of iGovTT, where we have to provide shared services, as you would know, for example, your infrastructure, your backup and recovery, software solutions, hosting services, etc. And those IT projects, to enable other activities, I do believe that consideration should be given to holding that or having that fall under the remit of the IT organization.
Mr. Chair, I just have two last questions. One of it, based on one of the responses Mr. Henry would have given, in terms of when you execute a project, let's say, for instance, I am aware, like in Mayaro here, there are a lot of schools, and I think perhaps the Mayaro police station, I remember making some queries concerning the IT infrastructure, their connectivity to the backbone and so on. And in several schools, we have the ministry's backbone, the equipment lying idly in a lot of the schools. And when I ask about, well, who is responsible for looking at it? Because sometimes the principals would call me in Mayaro and say, well, Mr. Parry, can you help us? Because, of my background and the business that I have. But is iGovTT responsible when you hand over these projects, so these servers and so on in all these schools? Who is responsible for making sure that it remains up and working and effective and carries out the maintenance and so on? Because I get the sense that when you hand over, the individual ministries are responsible for continuing the support. Is that correct?
Remember, yes and no, and I'm not trying to be cute. The reality is we hand over, but we are always here to assist. And this is why the model is, in a sense, iGovTT, which kind of operates like a group IT, and you have the individual ministries with their own internal IT. Now, we also provide, or we act as a wholesale provider. So we provide services, wholesale services that terminate at various sites. And the individual ministries really would, using their on-prem equipment to connect to the service or to utilize the service, will have some responsibility for maintaining the operations at the end site. But I want to say, this is why, and I kind of mentioned it at the start, where what I am seeing happening now is, for example, through the governance arrangements that exist at the Ministry of Public Admin and DT, there's an increasing focus on the governance of IT to ensure that these risks associated with obsolescence, not inability to support, etc., do not materialize. So in the past, that may have been the case, but what I am seeing now is definite movements through an appreciation of the guide practices, which you would be familiar with, being embedded. This is what MPADT is focusing on now, and I anticipate that we're going to start to see the benefits of that as we move forward.
And my last question, Mr. Chairman, and again to Mr. Henry. Mr. Henry, this is 2021 Trinidad and Tobago. Are you comfortable with the level of progress? I mean, iGovTT, from my reading, was, well, that version of the company was set up in 2009. It had an earlier existence. But in 2021, are you comfortable with the progress that iGovTT have been able to make so far? And if not, what do you think are some of the challenges that we as a committee can address in our final report to Parliament to jump those hurdles? Because I really believe that we have to make some quantum leaps in terms of technology. It may not sit well with a lot of people because we do have a citizenry that is a bit behind in the use of the technology, as you could have seen the impact with COVID-19 compared to the rest of the world. What would be some of those things that you would want us to address in our report that would make you comfortable that we will be where we ought to be by in 2030? What are some of those items?
Well, I would first off, I would say I am never satisfied. I always think that we could do more with whatever we have. So I think there is opportunity for us to move forward, and I think we would have seen that happening, particularly during this this COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of the support that we could get from the committee, I think we would have mentioned finding ways to make the role that we play as an IT organization with knowledge workers that are in demand to augment, to potentially move through the HR, the associated HR policies and practices that which we are governed by, so that we can make working at iGovTT and similar type institutions in government more attractive, so that we could attract and retain. I think in the Auditor General's reports of 2017, 2018, thereabouts, they also identified this whole issue of tenure for contracted workers. As you would know, once you're talking about IT organizations and supporting infrastructure, big infrastructure, we need to have a certain degree of continuity. And the way we have to find ways to ensure that the continuity is there. I think that is something that I think would be useful. And the other thing which I know is happening is the whole notion of developing a digital mindset. And I know the ministry of our line ministry is actively pursuing activities in that direction to look at the culture, within the public sector, so that we would have back a few years ago, there was this notion of a mobile first strategy. But now we want to create a digital mindset. And it is not necessarily about technology. It is about developing a profile of staff in the public sector that is agile, that is open, that is adaptable, that moves away from command and control to collaborate and communicate. I would just close by saying we need to understand that in the 21st century, the new illiteracy is not the 3 R's, It is an unwillingness to unlearn what we thought was gospel in the past and relearn new. And I think that is the mindset, that is the profile of team member that I tried to bring into iGov to support the agenda of our line ministry and by extension the government of Trinidad and Tobago. That is what those are the asks that I would have to you, member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Henry, and I wish you all the best at iGovTT, and I know we are depending on your organization to take us forward. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Rushton Perry. Before I invite my colleague, Minister Hines, to intervene second round, I just want to ask for a few clarifications. And before I get there, may I invite the CEO, Mr. Kirk Henry, to commit to writing your concerns and your thoughts as to ways and means that our committee can really seek to strengthen your overall goals and objectives as a very critical and significant organization for the transformation and continued development of ICTs in TNT. I'd like you to put that in writing for this committee. I want to start also by saying also that iGovTT reminds me of someone running extremely fast, but you are on the same spot. And it seems to me from what you have said to this committee that your hands seem to be tied. You want to do more. You would like to do more, but somehow there are some boulders and hurdles in your pathway. So you're on the same spot, running extremely fast, but from where I sit, you are not going anywhere. And I'll tell you why I make this submission for your consideration. In the 2019 audited financial statements, the company appears to be incurring losses. I dare say some comprehensive losses. In 2019, your audited financial statement revealed that your company, iGovTT, that's the acronym, suffered a $6.6 million loss. That was the recorded loss in 2019. In 2018, it was 7.9, or round it off to 8 million in terms of losses under expenses. And in 2017, it was about 3.7, round it again to $3.8 million in losses. But what did we see in terms of your administrative expenses? We saw in 2016, it was $53 million. In 2017, it was $42 million in terms of administrative expenses. In 2018, it was 40.2 million. And in 2019, it is down to 32.3 or 0.4 million. Now, look at this in the context of your submission based on questions that we asked and answers that you provided. We are seeing a high dependence on government subvention. In your SWOT analysis, you emphasize that as well, that your major source of revenue is government subvention. But against that background, you also highlighted certain weaknesses, certain challenges. One, low awareness of iGovTT. So there's a low awareness among the government state apparatus that you are supposed to serve through the MDAs, as they are called. There's a low awareness of iGovTT and the work that you do. There's also, according to you, no clear plan for dealing with dissatisfied clients. That is outlined in your threats and the SWOT analysis for the period 20 to 23, 2020 to 2023. You also indicated that other ministries and agencies seem to be running away, not using iGovTT. That's a major challenge that you are faced. And another one that you have identified is no authority to demand uptake for services that you provide. So we are seeing from your submission that there appears to be, and when I go to your submission, I see where when we ask, is iGovTT the sole provider executioner of ICT infrastructure projects and programs to government agencies? Your response, no. However, it is recommended that a shared services delivery model be used for solution delivery. There's no mandate. That is the point that you have emphasized here. There's no mandate for exclusivity. Individual MDAs often explore and engage the open market for similar offerings provided by iGovTT. And then when we look at your 2020 to 2023 submission in terms of your SWOT analysis, my colleague Rushton Paré pointed out under threats, lack of national policies, the MDAs can circumvent your mandate to use your services. Then you went on to talk about delays in legislative approvals for ICT. Then other ministries and agencies not using iGovTT. You talk about client dissatisfaction with outdated technology, and then no authority to demand uptake of some services. Now, Mr. Kirk Henry, CEO, when we look at all of this, when we look at this comprehensive picture that you have presented in different parts of your submission, I am very worried. I am very troubled. I am seeing where iGovTT is trying. They are carrying out their mandate insofar as it's practically possible. But you are faced with hurdles. You are faced with barriers. You are faced with boulders in your pathway. And therefore, this morning, in your own way, you are appealing to this committee to help iGovTT overcome these hurdles, overcome these obstacles in terms of providing the kind of services that you are designed to provide. I would like to ask both iGovTT as well as the Ministry of Finance Investment Division, what is being done to improve the viability and sustainability of this company? Because if things are not done to improve the viability and sustainability of this company, then we are going to see a replication of losses being incurred on an annual basis. And your dependency is going to mount in the coming period. So I would like to ask both iGovTT as well as the ministry, what is being done to improve the viability and sustainability of this company? First, I would like to hear from iGovTT, and secondly, I would like to hear from the ministry.
Certainly, member. I just want to point out, member, when we look at the submission, the issue with regard to low awareness, client dissatisfaction, this was the start of the SWOT analysis associated with the period 2017 to 2020. The current analysis, when we did the analysis, actually painted a different picture. What we see now is that there is an increase in the uptick of our services, as I mentioned, particularly heightened during the COVID pandemic period. We are onboarding significantly greater amount of users on our GovNet platform so that we could benefit. And indeed, in partnership with the Ministry of Public Admin and Digital Transformation, we were able to upgrade GovNet as we mentioned briefly at the start to current to bring it up to date with respect to the infrastructure and associated services and functionality that is required to support a modern public service. And I think a big thing, which it would be remiss of me if I don't mention it, is the governance arrangements that are in place, that MPADT is actively putting in place currently to address the whole issue of policy and controlling the use of or encouraging the use of standards across the MDA. So a lot of the problems which existed at the start of the end of 2016, 2017, when we did the most recent analysis, we actually are seeing a movement forward and an upward trajectory. Particularly in terms of the governance arrangement that I know the MPA, DT, and the PS is currently, because once we have that, it will, as we have a joke in IT, it will help us herd the cats, because it's a standard problem that happens when you have group IT environments with group IT and satellite sites around. So that I just want to make that point. But of course, we are welcome. We welcome the help, and we will certainly identify the things that some of our asks to ensure that we could continue to provide the service, this most important service to ministries in the first instance, and ultimately the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, the Ministry of Finance, may I invite the Ministry of Finance to address the question, what is being done to improve the viability and sustainability of iGovTT? Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Chairman. The Investments Division focuses on corporate governance, and the viability and sustainability resides under the remit of the Line Ministry, as well as the proposals for expanding mandates. So I'd like to defer this question to the Line Ministry, please.
All right. The Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of is that Public Administration and Digital Transformation. Can I invite your comments on the whole improvement of the viability and sustainability of this very important organization?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think I'll just want to start by supporting some of the comments made earlier that iGovTT has been doing a fair amount of very good work in terms of delivering on its mandate. The CEO for himself did indicate that he is a person who is never satisfied, constantly aspiring to deliver more, right? Agreed that right now, as we said at the start, given the pandemic, given all the challenges that we are facing as a country in terms of being able to deliver more and better services to our citizenry, we need to utilize ICT services and ICT technology to a greater extent. The issue of boulders in the way of iGovTT, all I would say, Chair, is that there are issues that may relate to some degree of awareness of the company's ability, not that its capability is in question. And the CEO just spoke to the issue of herding the cats. There is an extent to which all ministries and departments have a degree of freedom in terms of their spend, but we really need to take steps to guide them towards the shared services model and approach, which is what iGov has been set up to do. CEO Henry talked repeatedly, he mentioned it on quite a few occasions, of the governance mechanism that the ministry has put in place. This is a cabinet-approved framework that seeks to ensure greater discipline in terms of the ICT spend across the public service. For example, we have recognized that over the last few years, much of the spend that ministries have in the area of ICT is in terms of hardware and maybe software purposes to address internal operations rather than a spend that seeks to improve delivery to the citizen. i.e. spend that goes towards delivering services. So the governance framework that has been put in place that includes, for example, committees at the sub-cabinet level, committees that seek to draw upon wider public participation in the decision-making process, getting points of view from academia, from business, social society, civic society, and even internally at the ministry are really geared towards prioritizing what should be the spend on ICT, prioritizing what are the key projects that we need to initiate and push forward that again would help to develop government services and service delivery projects that would seek to develop internal capacity within the public service, develop capacity within the wider national society, develop the ICT sector nationally. So the governance mechanism would definitely seek to bolster the efforts of iGovTT because again, iGovTT is the ministry's key implementing agency. So as we start to use the governance mechanism, streamline our projects, we expect, we will ensure, we will use moral suasion to our fellow ministries and departments to utilize and point them in the direction of iGovTT, because iGovTT has the capacity to deliver on its mandate.
All right, well, I'll come back in a short while, but I'll invite...
Chairman.
Yes? Yes, sorry about that.
Respectfully, Chairman, because of the importance, I think the import of the question you raised, this is a discussion that we frequently have at the level of the board, and particularly the chairman of our finance committee does, he cogitates on this matter quite a bit, and I was wondering if respectfully we could allow him to share just a couple thoughts with respect.
Yes, of course, sure. We welcome our colleague to speak on this issue.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman. All right, there's been some clarity on talking about the viability of iGov. If you look at iGov, and I also want to deal a bit about Member Parry and his question in terms of the management data. So if you look at the history of iGovTT from 2015 to 2020, you would see that government subventions, and there's again, for some clarity, iGovTT does not go outside looking for clients. So we depend on subventions from government to exist. So when you look at losses in the context of iGovTT, what we're really looking at is excess expenditure over revenues. Unlike other companies, when they talk about losses, we're talking about revenues less expenditures, and they have clients from all over. We are really, to put in a simple term, we are like a department of government. So we get a certain allocation every year, and we spend accordingly. What has happened over the last couple of years is that our subventions have been cut from the financial year ended 2015, September 30th, 2015. In that particular year, the allocation to iGovTT was $190 million. Every year subsequently, it has declined into what I perceive as a much more reasonable limit. When we look at the year ending September 30th, 2020, the subvention from government in total was $31 million. And thereabouts, $31,408,000. Yeah? So we're moving from $190 million to $31 million. And we are getting more for less. Now, our expenditures moved from $138 million in 2015 down to $31 million in 2000. Yeah? So when you see those losses, you're seeing that 37 million, sorry. You're seeing that 6 million loss, or that 7 million, or that 8 million loss you're looking at is the excess of expenditures over a significantly reduced subvention. Significantly reduced subvention. And how do we deal with that? We utilize some of our cash resources to make up the difference. Yeah? And I assume that if this thing really gels well and we manage to digitize the entire public service, we will not be in a situation where you will be seeing losses going forward. Yeah? we will be getting subventions necessary to cover our necessary expenses. Yeah, what we are spending now is what I consider necessary expenses, and those expenditures most probably will go up as we beef up to satisfy the government's mandate. Yeah, okay, that is one. So I don't think you should be overly concerned about the sustainability of this particular institution. I think this institution will be sustained. Yeah, and I don't think that the losses that you're seeing is as bad as you think they are, because it is really excess expenditures over a significantly reduced subvention from government. Now, going back to the management letter, the management letter really outlines some of the deficiencies or things that the company can improve, and this is by an independent source, the external auditors. Right, so when in 2015 you would have seen about 4 or 5 items. I don't have the management letter in front of me, and that has been reduced, those items, one of which was the fixed asset register, and we dealt with that significantly. So today you can find any particular asset by just looking at our spreadsheet. Yeah, and we know where every asset within the organization is located. Now, we are going to computerize that, so it will be even a little more efficient. But without the computerization of that fixed assets register, we know where everything is located today. Yeah, and that system has been cured because we inherited that. And it is now such that we have moved to a point where over the last 2 consecutive years, been in receipt of management letters that has absolutely no substantive things of concern. Yeah. So when member Parry say, where is the management comment? We have nothing to comment on, because there is there's nothing that the auditors identify as a weakness. Yeah. So I just wanted to put that on the table. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dutton. Before I invite Member Dionarine to intervene, I wanted to ask this question to the Ministry of Finance. Given the growing use of ICTs and the need for more since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, should not the Ministry of Finance ensure that iGovTT, which is now an essential service provider, receive its total requested allocation as opposed to the subvention shortfall, as was just outlined by Mr. Dutton, on an annual basis? Can we get a response from the Ministry of Finance on this question?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, iGovTT will make their budget and their representations to the line ministry. The line ministry will then liaise with the budget division of the Ministry of Finance on the allocation of the subventions. So it's not really under the remit of the investments division. Thank you.
May I ask the acting permanent secretary of the Ministry of Public Administration and Information to clarify what has been going on with this truncation in the allocation on a regular annual basis to the ministry, to the iGov TT. Can you enlighten us on this?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try my best. As a company under the Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation, iGovTT would prepare its annual estimates of expenditure, well, for iGovTT proper, as well as its subsidiary, TT Connect. These will be submitted to the line ministry for review, for discussion with iGovTT, for explanations, justification. And once we reach on some final position, because of course, the company will have to be able to fund and pay for all its commitments, whether those are utilities, staffing, other commitments, liabilities, for example, as well as developmental work that it may need to do, right? So we clearly want to be able to have the company covering its operating expenses. But at any rate, by the time we come to some conclusion, finalization with respect to what we will be submitting to Ministry of Finance for estimates, those are submitted along with all the ministry's estimates. And we will then appear, if requested, before the Ministry of Finance to defend, as we say, our budget submissions. Thereafter, it is really up to the Ministry of Finance to determine what iGovTT gets, what the line ministry gets, and what every other ministry receives in the fiscal year that will be approached and, of course, approved by Parliament. Based on whatever is allocated to iGovTT for its expenditure during the fiscal, they will receive subventions, which will be released from the Ministry of Finance to the Ministry of Public Administration, and we will in turn release to iGovTT. So really, that's the process, Chair.
Yeah, but given the kind of severe cuts, we know the kind of crisis that we are faced with in TNT. But given the importance of this organization to the further transformation of this nation, what kind of representation subsequent to that allocation is made by the Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation to the Ministry of Finance, appealing to the ministry to at least provide that entity with some further increases, given the kind of cuts, severe cuts that we are seeing and we have been informed about?
Well, in the first instance, while the focus is on iGovTT right now, we might be looking at ICT spend across the entire public service, because again, there is that mandate for all ministries and departments to digitalize your services, to digitize your records. So that could very well be a plea in respect of all such initiatives, not just with respect to iGov. But with respect to iGov, as I said earlier, Chair, coming out of the annual budgeting process, there is an allocation that is approved by Parliament. Certainly, if there is an aggressive spend during the first half of the fiscal, we can, once the opportunity arises, we can go back to the Ministry of Finance at the midterm and make a plea for additional resources, in which case I suppose the theoretical approach is that there's much more work to be done, and if there are other heads that may not have been performing, funds could be allocated. But the allocation to the national budget, as you know, is a fixed one. But certainly the ministry at the midterm could make appeals for additional funds.
All right, thank you. May I invite Member Dinorine?
Thank you, Chair. So, given this whole, move with iGovTT, what exactly could you all submit the utilization report for us of all the various ministries? Is there a report that you all conduct? Because I'm trying to understand. For some reason, you all have an idea of where you want to go, but outright, I'm not getting a sense of where we are right now in terms of the number of ministries that are utilizing your services. The intention is to go 100%, but we need to know by ministry what exactly is the existing utilization rate. So if you could submit that in writing for us, we will appreciate that. And also, right now, if you can't tell us off the top of your head, is it that other than the Ministry of Trade, are all ministries currently hosting their website? Are you all hosting the websites of all ministries right now? Or is website hosting done externally?
We provide DNS services to a series of ministries. but some ministries or some agencies do go external. So once you go to our website and you see that .gov, then you would know that we are affiliated. And the other thing is, in terms of the former question with regard to the utilization, we have those stats by ministry, by service that we would definitely share with you.
Yes, because that's the only way. When we look at that, we would be able to offer additional recommendations and suggestions for you all in our final report. And I'm also asking this because the question of security and cybersecurity comes into play as well, and we haven't discussed that yet. Now, if we remember a couple of years ago, I can't remember exactly when, there was a hack with the Ministry of National Security, and I'm wondering to what extent iGovTT provides that security for platforms affiliated with government IT services.
Remember, we do play a role, but I would like to beg indulgence to perhaps if we could discuss that off camera. The cybersecurity element,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you know, please.
Mr. Chairman, one moment, please, member. Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I just heard the question and I just heard the response of the veritable and learned CEO. For reasons that we have traversed in this committee in times past, Mr. Chairman, given all the experience you have, I'm sure you would want to concur with the suggestion that this matter be dealt with, because we are now in the realm of cybercrime. We are in the realm of cybercrime. We have laws that are fully proclaimed, and we have circumstances touching on the response to the question outside of the responsibility and the capacity for the CEO. So I would want to urge your intervention, Mr. Chairman, so that we desist from this line for the moment, at any rate.
I don't understand. Allow the CEO.
Let me elucidate. Let me elucidate then, just so that I'll make sure that you understand. I thought you did, but let me elucidate. The question put to the CEO was, what action has or is iGovTT taken to prevent hacking in national security? That I, as a committee member, consider is outside of the purview of the matters in front of us this morning. 1. 2, the substantive issue being raised is a legal issue, and to some extent, the responsibility of others. The mandate of iGovTT and the documents in front of us for this committee's interrogation does not carry sufficiently widely for the entertainment of that. That is my suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
If that is the question, Amrita, member Dionarine, if that is the question that you have raised, I will ask you to, rephrase your statement and not necessarily go into the area that Minister Hines has outlined, because that is not within our remit.
I thought you would say refrain then, since it's not.
No, just in case, she might want to approach a question differently without infringing upon or trampling upon our mandate.
No, but we have agreed that the subject matter is outside.
Yes, I agree with what you have said. So you don't have to pursue the matter any longer.
Okay, thank you kindly.
So I'm allowing, I'm asking Member Dionarine to continue, but not along the line that she started.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Yes, Member Dionarine.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes.
I would desist from this line of questioning.
Yes.
So now I wanted to move along to current issues and the involvement of iGovTT. Now the intention is to get iGovTT to be the centralized hub for all public service or government ICT services in the future, right? And this COVID-19 pandemic is a typical or is the ideal situation where you could entertain yourself as becoming one of the being more involved in government IT services, right? So my question then is how involved has iGovTT been in the deployment of the ICT infrastructure or the ICT services with the COVID-19 pandemic and Ministry of Health?
CEO?
Yes. Remember, we have been involved from the get-go with the Ministry of Health, not just in some of the ongoing projects that they were engaged in. We have been assisting essentially from the start, whether we talk about assisting with procuring specific devices in a short time to facilitate an activity, whether it is supporting configuration of sites to support the administering of shots or jabs, as the English say. We involved in that. We would have deployed a chatbot solution to assist with responding to inquiries by the general public on their website. We would have deployed as part of a whole omni-channel strategy to service delivery, virtual contact center facilities where we, via our TT Connect channel, would support inquiries, non-medical of course, regarding activities in the Ministry of Health. And this is in addition to the normal work that we do with them, whether it is the support of augmenting their internal IT, because they were under a tremendous amount of pressure during this pandemic period. So we have been, I would dare say, very involved during this period, from facilitating virtual sessions, not only at the Ministry of Health, at multiple ministries. We supported our leadership, the cabinet, with respect to the setup of virtual cabinet meetings, the deployment of the tools that we have by leveraging the existing enterprise agreements that we have. I would have mentioned the deployment of the online payment systems at the Attorney General, again, all with a view towards minimizing the face-to-face contact that citizens were exposed to. We assisted with the travel exemption application. I mean, I could provide a list, because my memory may not be serving me. It's close to lunch maybe, and so, but we have really been pushing the team, and I just want to take the opportunity. You gave me an opportunity to recognize the team at iGov, because they have been doing human service, and they did not miss a beat. They have answered the call on every single occasion. I have gotten to know the inside of almost everybody's homes through this channel, because we are constantly meeting. And just to add, during that period, we internally had to do some work to engage our staff, to provide some enhanced support, because this channel, it limits the physical contact. And we were one of the very first. We started planning for the pandemic coming to the end of December, January, when we were seeing the stories on CNN. And when the government announced that we would need to go into a lockdown mode, we just activated our plans, because we were able to move everything in a remote. So we have been intimately involved with many a ministry in providing service, in adjusting business processes, in acquiring devices, in developing. We even developed the application that the Road to Recovery Committee used to solicit feedback from citizens in terms of what we would need to do to recover from this pandemic. But I could provide something in writing in case my memory is really failing me.
Okay, and mentioned during the course of the discussion, mention was made about online services being provided to children to ensure adequate access or equality of access to schooling during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, and I know that mention was made about these community access centers. How many in total are they?
Let me just ask my DCO to assist.
The total number, actually have to defer to the PS on this one, because the ministry would have undertaken some of the access centers directly as well.
Yes.
Okay, Chair, through you, we currently have 6 ICT access centers in operation.
Okay, so since there are just 6, could you identify where they are?
Sure. We have at Pinal, Mara, sorry, I was muted there for a sec. Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay, I'll start again. So we have at Pinal, Marak, Guayari, Kumana, Todd's Road, and the most recent was opened last year, I think around October, Karanaj.
Okay, and I recall over the course of the past couple of years, I recall there was centers opened in Sisters Road, Navet, Waterloo, and Barrapo. Are those still, I know that they were fully commissioned and outfitted. Are those still open and functional? And if not, what happened to them and what are the next steps to make them fully functional?
Okay, as I understand it, I don't think the Waterloo Center was ever opened formally, even though it would have been outfitted. Sisters and Barrackpore, I think in the case of Barrackpore, there may have been a decision to share operations from Pinal, but again, I can clarify that subsequently. Yeah.
Okay, and is the Ministry of Public Administration or iGovTT capturing data on the number of persons that are accessing these facilities and to ensure that they are benefiting the persons who they intend to benefit?
Yes, data is being captured on usage, daily usage. That information comes directly from the centers to the Ministry of Public Administration. So we would track, as you said, the number of visits per day, the nature of the visits, because, for example, what the centers have been set up to do is certainly to provide internet access to members of the community. They've been set up to provide training in simple, basic IT skills. There is some business facilitation. There's scanning of documents. People could, so there's a wide range of services that are provided. And the data, the statistics in terms of usage and applications for support are provided to the ministry on a regular basis.
Okay, through you, Chair, is it possible to have the PS submit this to us in writing, these details?
Yes, sure.
Yes, yes.
And my final question, Mr. Chair, through you, is now when the budget was read and it was announced that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been an overall move and shift towards the digital economy, digitalization, and digitization. One of the focus of the existing government, and it was outlined in the budget, was that they want to move towards ensuring that every aspect of the public service is able to have the ability to work remotely via VPN connections and so on. Where are we in trying to achieve this? What is this going to, has an assessment done on how much it is going to cost and the length of time that it will take for something like this to happen? Because I understand that the public service is a huge number of persons to have to try and adequately equip them to function remotely in the event of something like this ever having to happen again, such that we have nationwide shutdown.
Chair, through you, with respect to a work from home policy for the public service, that initiative is actually being led by the Ministry of Planning and Development. It involves about 5 ministries who are supporting, one of which is the Ministry of Public Administration and Development. So the policy is currently being developed.
And do you have a timeline on the policy? How long would the policy take to be developed and so on?
I couldn't say right now, through your chair.
Okay, I'm finished with my line of questioning.
Chairman, can I join the conversation now, please?
Just hold a second. Yes, continue, do you mind?
Mr. Chair, I'm completed. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I'm sorry, Laurel Zama, you can now intervene.
Thank you, Chairman.
My apologies. My apologies. My apologies.
Completely in the first round, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's quite all right. Several of the questions that I would have raised, as indicated previously, would have related to strategic plan and corporate governance. And I am tremendously satisfied by the set of questions that would have been asked in the first round of questioning. Chairman, because I need to take my leave shortly, I have a funeral to attend. I must put on the record my tremendous satisfaction with the work of iGovTT. I know that the government's thrust is towards digitalization and digitization throughout the country and in every sphere of the country, particularly in the public sector. And I am extremely excited at what I have heard here. I'm excited and motivated by all of the different documents that would have been submitted. I am satisfied that iGovTT is really trying to fulfill its mandate. I would love to hear a little more about the ICT blueprint that has been set out. I know that we've been talking about interoperability and interconnectivity between the ministries, and I do know that that is one of the weaknesses that have been identified because I've been looking at the SWOT analyses for the different timeframes. And I do hope that this committee can provide some assistance because your company is extremely important as pertains to the developmental thrust that is articulated in Vision 2030. I'm satisfied as well that Mr. Henry, who I think is doing a remarkable job, has been speaking about fostering a climate of innovation and capacity building and agility and talking about enhanced government arrangements, etc. And I'm really, really very satisfied. And as somebody who's just come out of the youth demographic not too long ago, and somebody who's very IT connected, I think this is exactly the way we need to go. And I do hope that more ministries continue to take advantage and more public sector, public service, agencies take full advantage of what iGovTT has to offer. And I look forward to really exciting times on Trinidad and Tobago being either forcibly or willingly pulled into the modern technology era and being able to keep up with the demands of the world. And so that we can increase our own competitive index and our own customer service delivery throughout the country. I know that several ministries are reliant on or are moving towards online activity, and I really look forward to that. And that's just my intervention. So thank you to all of you, and huge congratulations because I am tremendously satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mrs. Laura Zamalisi. Mr. Parry.
Thank you, Chair. I know we are running perilously close to the end of the session, so I just have a question that I think that Mr. Henry may be able to answer briefly, or if not, we would accept the response in writing. Now, on question 7, your response to question 7, which was referring to the execution of the National ICT Plan, you identified 8 items which were challenges, right? I think if you were to give us an indication of some of the root causes for these 8 items, and I will just, for the record, just mention it. Limited ICT governance structures across the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, which impacts MDA's alignment to overall planning. 2, conflicting priorities, shifting focus at MDAs. 3, low maturity of ICT processes within ministries, departments, and agencies. 4, inability to secure the necessary CAPEX and OPEX for the solutions and personnel to implement and ensure continued support of solutions. 5, the adoption of a siloed approach by MDAs. And the last item, HR attrition at iGovTT and MDAs reducing the capacity which is required for focused attention. Now, I think these are 8 items that are extremely critical, that if you could identify to us, and I think in writing, what are some of the root causes and some of the areas that would resolve these challenges for you, it will play an integral role in our reporting as we write the line minister and the government to kind of help you solve some of these issues going forward. So if you have a comment to make, that's fine. If not, well, we'll accept the information in writing going forward. Thank you.
Member, thanks for that question. Just a brief comment. You would observe, with the exception of the last item, all of the items really relate to governance arrangements. The guide practices, for example, that exist in COVID, for example, is something new to the environment. And what is happening currently, and this is why the PS would have said that I kept repeating it. I know for a fact from the highest levels, from the cabinet come down, the governance arrangements are either in place or at very close to completion in terms of execution. And it is to give time, there will be a gestation period for it to take root. But MPADT currently is squarely focused as the policymaker, where we take our lead in making this a reality, and we are part and parcel of supporting that effort. But nevertheless, I will undertake to provide comments in writing for you, member.
Thank you very much. I would just like to ask in closing to Mr. Henry, as it relates to page 27 of your submission, under the item risk management, there are a number of principal risks associated with iGovTT mandate. I think around 8 of them. Can I ask briefly of the CEO to summarize for us what will be done or what measures are being taken to address these risk management matters, just in a brief summary, and then you can commit pen to paper subsequently by identifying in a more detailed manner. But for the time being, can you provide us with a tight summary of some of the risk management factors and how are we going to be addressing same?
Certainly, Chairman. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, the reality is these risk categories, they were identified at the inception by the consultant when they were setting up iGovTT, and it speaks to the overall environment. And if you look at them, most of them are associated with governance items as it relates to IT, not necessarily corporate governance, but governance of enterprise IT, which is a subset of that. And the work that MPADT is currently undertaking in conjunction with some of the elements of our iGovTT strategic plan proper, it is intended that those things will address those items. So items, for example, item one, absence of government e-leadership, absence of, we have that now. We have a ministry focused on that with 2 ministers and the PS who we work very closely with. Absence of the required regulation. I know for a fact that has been attended to. Government policies, well, I raised that even in our SWOT analysis. And again, we have committees. We have a GLAC, which is sponsored by MPADT. This is Government Information Tech Leaders, and they're actively working, looking, making recommendations for onward submission to the leadership. Funding, we spoke about that. PS gave an undertaking there. So I think those are the problems, but the reality is I feel confident that we are making progress. We are trending in the right direction. We are on an upward trajectory. And opportunities like this to share and to ventilate, I think is just what I like to say, you bring sunshine. Sunshine is the best disinfectant, and I am confident that a lot of these things will be addressed. I am optimistic.
All right, thank you so very much, Mr. CEO. Whatever additional areas or questions that we may need to have clarified will be submitted in writing to the iGov team, the Ministry of Finance, as well as Ministry of Public Administration. But for the time being, we are very, very near to our period where we want to bring proceedings to a close. And I would like to really sincerely thank the chairman, the Ministry of Finance, I should say, officials from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, officials from the Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation, as well as officials from the National Information and Communication Technology Company Limited for being here with us over the last period of time. So unless there are other interventions to be made, I would like
Mr.
to...
Chair?
Yes.
I'm more than grateful for your oblique invitation. I feel compelled, as I'm sure you do, on behalf of others of my colleagues who spoke here, to indicate, because the public gets to see this, and they've seen other CEOs appear before us, and they've come to their own conclusions in the spirit of our democracy. But I'm sure they will all share the view that this young CEO, the permanent secretary, the minister who did not appear before us, and all of the operatives in iGovTT have really settled into their mandate, and they are making a most wonderful and necessary contribution to our advancement in Trinidad and Tobago. So for that reason, on my own behalf, and on behalf of all those who may not have a forum to speak here like me, who share the view in describing his passion, his knowledge of his profession, his depth, his range, and his management capacity, I would like to extend, not that it's perfect, nothing is perfect, but I can tell you he has acquitted himself remarkably well. And on behalf of all of us, I would like to extend my personal and collective congratulations and admiration to this CEO and to iGovTT as a whole, under the guiding hand of the permanent secretary and the ministers responsible. I would like to extend sincere congratulations. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yes, thank you so very much. As we bring proceedings to a close, may I, on behalf of this committee, warmly extend our heartfelt congratulations to the team that have been with us for the last few hours, all officials from the Ministry of Finance Investments Division, all officials from the Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation, as well as all officials from the iGovTT, which is the National Information and Communication Technology Company Limited, for being here with us and for sharing your thoughts and views on this very important matter of your operations and your future endeavors and objectives as manifested in your strategic plan for 2020-2023. So at this time, we will excuse all of you, and this meeting is now suspended. Thank you so very much.